Okay, this video is going to be another in the survival, we'll say series. We'll call this post-event survival community setup. Now, I recently did a video called Post-Event Survival Community Market, where we were a small town, we fortified ourselves, and after a while we decided, hey, people are going to want to talk, they're going to need things, so let's set up a weekly market where people can go get information, trade for what they need. Well, that video actually had pretty good response with my patrons over Patreon, and request from them was, hey, can you do some more videos along these lines of survival community and that type of stuff scenarios, because not everyone is going to be part of a resistance movement. Not everyone is going to be in a militia. Most people are going to be more concerned each day with how they're going to get food to feed their families, who's going to protect them from criminals who are going to come in there and try to take what they have. Is there going to be medical to take care, to help when their kid is sick with something serious? So this series that I'll be doing, and it'll be off and on, you know, I'll spread out stuff over time as I get other ideas from people on what they'd like to see. This is the final request from my patrons since Patreon took down the channel. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, with setting up our community, the main overarching thing you need to think of all the time is respecting people's rights. And what are the basics for rights in this country? Life, liberty, property, and I'll put in there individual freedoms. I know some people will say, well, it's supposed to be pursuit of happiness, security guy. True, but guess what? When the time comes that you need to plant food and process food so you survive the next winter, that trumps your desire to go out and get laid, or to just go out and screw around swimming. Defense of your community will take precedence over you thinking only about your own skin, wanting to hide in your basement. Now, I have up here 7 areas that I could think of that you should think about when or if you're trying to set up a survival community, from most important to lesser important. I'm not going to say least important, because all of this is important for a community. Now, first off, the very first thing you need to think about is water. Potable water. Drinking water. Why? Because how long can you survive without drinking water before the chance of you dying increases massively? Okay, just so you know, original version we did of this video, I did have Combat Cameraman giving some responses to this stuff as we went along, but he is dealing with a respiratory infection right now, and his hacking and that stuff when he was doing answers was pretty bad, so we decided to redo this. But the answer is 3 days. You can live up to 3 days without water. Beyond that, your chance of dying from dehydration skyrockets. Now, most communities in the United States were settled near easy to get water sources, such as rivers, streams, creeks, ponds, lakes. In our little community we have down here in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere, we'll call it Beaverville. It was located next to a river. Now, in the old days, even though you were located near an easy to get water source, a lot of people would dig wells or put in hand pumps in the community so they could draw water without having to go down to the river every morning, especially in the middle of winter time. Find out where those wells used to be. Look into the history of your community now. Find out how did they used to get their water when that town was founded. Did they just do the bucket chain thing from that river? Where were the first wells dug? Where were the first pumps put in? See if those are still there. And if they're not, well, could we potentially still dig a well to get water from that location? Research it. So in our little community down here, let's say there were a few wells that were dug and a few pumps. So we found out, looking in the old records, history of the community, we found out there used to be a community pump right here at the corner of the roads. Well, now it's paved over, concreted over. So that's probably a no-go. Well, what other locations did we have? We also found out there used to be an old pump back here behind that house. Is it still there? Is it still operational? We also found out there used to be one over here. A hand-dug well they used to haul up with buckets. Is the well filled in? Or did they just put some logs over the top and buried it? Find out. Get the stuff in there. Now, if you are in a desert community, you do not have access to an aquifer, easy access, your desert community is probably going to be a ghost town in no time from either everyone leaving or everyone dying from dehydration. Water, your number one priority. This one up here, can't do nothing about, because, you know, with all the construction that's happened over the last 100, 150 years, whenever it was, that hand pump used to be there, that one's out of consideration. We got these down here that are potentials. Another possibility is getting together a team and hand digging a well. Or if you do have access to the equipment that you can drill a well that you can attach a hand pump to, do it. Remember, this is after an event has occurred. And let those property owners know too that, hey, all of us are going to need water. Can we please use where this pump was? Can we please use where that well was to supply water for the community? Now, next up, your next consideration after you've secured your water sources so that people aren't going to die of thirst, defense. Sooner or later, you're going to have to deal with bandits. You're going to have to deal with criminals. So what can you do about that? Well, one thing can be walls or fences around the community. If you don't have enough manpower or enough materials, then maybe you're not going to have that. Maybe you'll come up with something else. Every community should have a community defense group or militia that is formed of all able-bodied males of sound mind. Meaning you don't want a person who's mentally disturbed or someone who has a severe mental handicap. You want the people that can tell the difference between right and wrong, when to shoot, when not to shoot, and who to shoot. You don't want someone there who's going to kill everyone indiscriminately. Now I have in here just general on this, figure the ages of 15 to 50. Look at your state's laws. Every state in this country has on the books laws and statutes concerning the militia. Go off of those. There's going to be an age range in there. Use that age range. Militias are not illegal, contrary to what you may have heard. They're actually recognized in the law for every state. Now, someone's probably saying, well, what about females? Shouldn't we draft females? Should we make them join? I'd say have them be volunteers. Same age range though, same criteria. Now, another thing you're going to have to think about is policing. You're going to have petty crimes. How are you going to deal with it? Maybe you get raided by a batch of bandits and you wound a couple of them and you capture them. What are you going to do with it? Well, that's where you having that local little police force comes into play. Hopefully you got someone from law enforcement who's trustworthy and not an authoritarian type. You can make them your town sheriff. But we got here in our community, now we'll add some stuff to it. Here's our layout. We have major road going like this, major road coming off like this. We have this ridge line up here, high point up here that can overlook everything. And we got a forest over here. This over here, this over here, this over here is farmland. And then obviously a bridge over the river down here. Now for defense, get your community together while you still have fuel. Get some volunteers and maybe get a scrape going for an anti-tank ditch. And then take the spoil from that anti-tank ditch and use it to build a berm as an additional protection. So if you dig a hole that's 5 foot deep, well, with that ditch and the spoil from it piled up behind it, you're going to have about 10-foot distance, maybe a bit more, of a wall that any attacker would have to try to get over. And the next one will be food. We'll incorporate some of that in that. So we're going to go through here. We got some farmers. Someone had a front end loader or bulldozer. We get them working on both sides at the same time. But obviously if one side is closer to a large community, you know, prioritize that side. So we decided we're going to go, say, maybe a half mile out from town. And we do our tank ditch and berm up to the ditch along that major road. Berm is going to be on the friendly side. And then we continued it down here, giving ourselves that about half mile or so, give or take. Doesn't have to be perfect. Conform it to the terrain. Berm behind it. Well, why are we going a half mile outside of town, security guy? Why aren't we putting it right on the edges? So we get some farm field inside here that we can use as community gardens or farming crops. And then over here, we'll try doing the same thing. Tank ditch dug here. Tank ditch dug here. Berm it. Now down here along the river, probably you're going to take your spoil from the backside and push it towards the river. Berm it going across. Well, that's going to be a lot of diesel, security guy. Yes, it will. At a minimum, I'd say go through there, make a good scrape first as the outline that you're going to be going off of. And when you would run out of diesel, then that's when it becomes pick and shovel brigade. People out there using those shovels, using those pickmatics to dig it out a little bit deeper. And you're moving the dirt up onto the berm using buckets and ropes. So up here we did the same thing. Berm it behind it. Well, let's say we ran out of gas when we got down here, but we had the initial scrape up here. This being a little bit of a shorter leg in theory, that's the one that we figure if we have to dig it by hand, we want it to be there. Now down on the roadways, you are going to want to try to put in some type of gates going across, some type of fencing. Think of entry control points into American bases overseas. Serpentines. So if you can, if you have access to it, get something in there to build a serpentine approaching the berm on each spot or as they're going across the bridge. Or I should say from halfway on the bridge closer, because you want a nice open kill zone further out. Well, security guy, what's a serpentine? I'm not militia, I'm not military, I don't know what that is. And we'll see here if combat cameraman will want to adjust just a little on this. So we got barrier here, barrier here, barrier here, barrier here. Anyone that's approaching would come up, have to slow down, go around the barrier, go around the barrier, go around the barrier, and when he gets up into this spot here, they're point blank range on the defenders. Did you get kind of a picture with that? Okay, he gave me a thumbs up. What do you use as barriers? Well, if you have access to the concrete barriers, the K-rails, go ahead and use those. If you can't move them, heavy vehicles. Larger, heavy vehicles. Buses work real good. Delivery trucks work real good. And when you get them up there, take the tires off of them, drop them down on blocks, you know, whatever. Get them down on the ground. You don't want them to be easily moved. Another thing, log crib, another video I had done on. Most of this on defenses, I've done videos on these in the past in the first year of this channel. You can go back and you can look in that under militia engineer tasks. Now over here, we got it open over here. Well, what can we do there? That's one of those things where maybe we're going to have to try putting in a fence, because we're going to want to put some type of observation post right up here on the high point on that ridge. So maybe we're going to clear out as much vegetation as we can, depending on the terrain. And we'll get some barbed wire from fencing, whatever we have. Maybe we'll have to put in kind of a post fence using some trees from over here cut down, whatever, to create kind of a fence going up around here with our observation post up there. Barring that, you don't have the material, then put it going across down here with an exit that people can use to get up to a fortified observation post on top. Well, what do you mean fortified, security guy? Exactly that. Dig a damn bunker. Build a bunker. Get some concrete up there, some block, stones, whatever. Dig a bunker, reinforce it around that, and stock it so that they can be under siege. Well, how long should they be under siege? Let's plan at least a week. So they're going to need food. They're going to need water. You know, make sure that they have some sleeping bags up there, a small heater with some wood stocked right nearby, potentially in their bunker, that they can use to stay warm if they're being shot at. Fields of fire and that stuff around it, you get the idea. Community defense group, going on to them now. Let's say they should train at least once a week for, you know, from say sun up till noon, when the sun is the highest in the sky. They get together, they do basic battle drills, they learn how to be a soldier. And it doesn't matter who teaches them, you know, it can be someone who was in the Navy, someone who was in the Air Force, who was a World War II veteran. They can at least give you something to go off of that you can start from and learn from. Train, train, train. I wouldn't do too much live fire training because you're going to want to preserve your ammunition. Do some force on force, you know, one group against the other group. Come up with whatever you can for scenarios. You're repelling people from attacking the community. Your bandits took over a building and they're holding hostages. Well, you got to go in there and get them out. Come up with your own little procedures on how to do the stuff. Train, train, train. At least once a week for half that day. And the other half of the day, use for your tasks you got to do for that day. Your sheriff, the community policing, they should be headquartered out of, if you do not have a sheriff's station or police station, they should be headquartered in what passes for the quote-unquote town hall in that little community. You know, give them a room somewhere that they can use, build a holding cell for when someone gets out of line, they get too drunk, they got to get separated before they beat their spouse, that type of thing. Okay, next area, food, long term. Obviously, we got a river down here, so maybe we can set up some way of fishing. Maybe we're going to put in some fish traps down in here that the current will push the fish into those traps. Another thing that you could potentially think about, depending on the contour of the river here, maybe you could dig out or start to dig out a channel and then a big little pit inside here that you can basically make into your own fish farm. Going underneath the berm there, well, you'll build a kind of a culvert or something over that. You'll put some good grading in there that fish can squeeze through but a person can't. And then you open up that channel to that river so that the water from the river will flow into there and keep that pond level with the river. It will equal out between the two of them. And hopefully you can get some fish. If you figure it out, I'm sure there's a way to do it. You can divert some of the fish as they're coming down right into that pond. You now have a renewable fish pond for your community that people can go and catch the fish in nets each morning. Whoever's going to be in charge of supplying fish. You also got over here forest. And you got the farmlands that were out here. Well, for a little while you'll be able to get wild game. Not for a long time, because sooner or later, you know, you're going to deplete them. Maybe you can bring in some livestock from some of the farms outside if you can convince them to come into town. Like in the survival community market video, maybe you can set up some RVs, some campers in a location that people can be housed in. Maybe there's an empty house in that town, someone moved out, they're gone. Well, it's empty, move a family in there. Maybe you can move a farmer and his family into there and move some of his livestock into the community. So let's say there's this house down here was empty. You know, we brought in a farmer who was up over this way. He's kind of a ways out. We wouldn't be able to help him. Well, he had some sheep. Well, maybe we'll, you know, there was a yard on this, maybe there wasn't, but we'll make sure he gets some type of pen around the back of the house, and he can have his sheep inside there. Those sheep can also be used when they have a shepherd with them to take care of the grass around the community. I had relatives that did that 100 years ago. They used to live on a farm. They had sheep. The reason they had the sheep is so that they could get the wool to spin into yarn, to weave into clothing. And then the sheep were the lawnmowers of that farm so that the sons and the husband could concentrate on just doing the farming, didn't have to worry about cutting the damn grass all the time. And then the sheep poop, well, that just ended up becoming fertilizer out in the fields. We have parts of farm field here, parts of here, parts of here. Well, the crops that are in there that first year, obviously they still belong to the farmer, but the community will find some way to reimburse them somehow. Maybe that protection and that stuff. And those farm fields and that stuff that are still up in here and that, turn them into community gardens and that. Lawns, I think you should devote a good chunk of your lawn to a survival garden post-event, like they did in World War II, the Victory Gardens. Dig up that grass, you know, where it's will allow for a good garden. It has the right light, the right drainage, the soil's good for it. Put in a garden there. And remember, heirloom veggies. So that gets us basic into food. Now we have, next consideration, medical. I know this may sound boring, but remember, you're trying to think of how your community will survive long term. You do not know how long this collapse event will last. It could only last a couple months. It could last generations. So the more planning you do on this, the better. Medical. Hopefully, you'll have a nurse or a vet, an EMT, someone who used to be a medic in the military, a corpsman, or a medical student. Hopefully, there's someone that you can use to be that person to take care of the medical needs of that community. Set them up a location as a community clinic if there isn't one. Well, what could we use? How about a store that's not going to be needed anymore, a small store? Maybe one that's been empty for a while. This is a community in the middle of nowhere. So maybe they don't have, you know, as many small stores as they used to. A lot of them are empty now. Take one of those. Hey, that's now the community clinic. And the person that owns that building, well, they'll probably get a little bit higher priority on medical care when you have to do triage. As much as possible, though, if someone is sick, take care of them at their home. Don't move them to that clinic unless you have to because you have some type of isolation ward. Remember, an illness can spread through a small, closed community like this, like wildfire in a forest that's been in drought for a couple of years. It will spread quick. It will cause a lot of problems. Next up, education. Plain and simple. People got to learn. Not just the kids, but the adults, especially in the beginning. Hold those classes for people, teaching them how to garden if they don't know how. Teach them how to sew to repair their clothing, how to fish, how to put out traps for small game, how to do some basic work in their own homes to maintain it. And then obviously kids, you should still have school. Think of the old style country school from back in the pioneer days. Everybody, all those kids from kindergarten age to essentially junior high were in the same classroom getting the same lessons, but you made the individual assignments a little bit more complicated for the older kids than you did the younger kids. You could hold that education, if you do not have a school there, you can hold that in a church like they used to do. You could hold it in that town hall or that community center. And that's where those kids are going to be during the daytime, during your fall, winter, and early spring months. During the summer, those kids need to be helping with gathering firewood for the winter, helping plant and grow those crops, helping fish and preserving the fish, salting it, whatever, drying it for that coming winter. That's why we have the education system that we have in this country where the kids are off during the summer It was made that way so that they could help their parents take care of the crops and get things ready for that coming winter. During the winter, you're not doing as much, and that was the time that you concentrated on teaching your kids. Now the next one in here, I tossed this in, self-sufficiency, and that's for the community. What types of things are you going to need to support that community? Well, types of things I could think of. How about a tailor or a seamstress? Someone who can make clothes, repair clothes. How about a cobbler? And I'm not talking that thing that has fruit in it that you eat as a dessert. A cobbler was a term for someone who made and repaired shoes and boots. Does anyone have that skills anymore? Those Nikes you got from the store, those cheap China-made shoes that you got from Walmart, they're going to wear out quickly. You're going to have to replace it. Well, you can go with moccasins, but they wear out quick too. Things to think about. Think about a blacksmith. How about a sawmill to produce lumber for your community? Because you're not going to be able to go to big city over here to the lumber yard to get those 2x4s that you need to build that addition. You're going to need people that's going to be able to tell the difference on the trees over here, what's going to work to turn into lumber and what isn't. And how long you should cure those logs before you cut them up so that you can make your lumber. What you need to do to those logs to make sure they don't warp while you're drying them. All those little things that you need for a community to survive. Look into the pioneer era. Find out. You're going to need someone who knows how to collect seeds and clean seeds so that they're ready for the next planting season. Get the idea? And in self-sufficiency, maybe I should throw in there, how about a grain bin or two, dismantled from a farm, brought into the community and built somewhere that you can hold that corn, you can hold that grain. And then the last one on here, you need to think about regular meetings and markets. People are always going to want information. In the beginning, you'll probably have someone who has a working radio, a ham radio connected to batteries, a generator, a hand crank, whatever. They're getting information. Well, you should have a way to disseminate that information. Maybe you're going to want to write up or print out a community bulletin that you can post in a board on the outside of that community center, that town hall, like they used to do. Have a few message boards set up that you can put on, hey, this is the morning's information for, what the fuck is today? 25 November this year. Morning edition, here's the news that we have. If you don't have anything that should be put out for that day, just have a sign already ready that you can put in there that says, no new information, no new news at this time. And then, you know, community markets, it's a great time for people to get together, trade for what they need, find out what's going on, see who needs help. I'm willing to bet at those meetings that you have, those markets that you have, that's when you're going to find out about, hey, Mabel, who's 60 years old, lives in that trailer at the edge of town by herself. Her husband died of cancer last year. Her kids weren't here. They were up in the big city. She needs help. She's too proud to say that she needs help. Or she's not able to leave to do what she needs to do. Get the community together. Help her out. And the only way you can find that out, those community meetings, those community markets, get together, pass information, find out what's going on. Talk to the person that's in charge of the town. And you know what? Maintain your election schedule. whenever the next election is supposed to be for that mayor, that city manager, whatever it is, still hold it when it's supposed to be then. Don't just automatically say, okay, you're mayor for life. No, term limits and so forth, all right? Rotate it through the community. Think like you are an early settler in this country, pushing into the wilderness, creating a town from scratch. But you got a leg up. You have a community you're building off of. You're just adding to it. When you're thinking of defending it, think of it like a medieval village. And you're trying to protect against advancing Mongols or advancing bandits. Now, someone did ask me a question of how militias, resistance organizations that are fighting in a war, approach a community like this. Approach with the smallest group as possible. Friendly, white flag, whatever. Don't steal from them. Don't pressure them. Offer to help them. If they need help at harvest time, try to help them out with harvesting those crops. And tell them that, hey, if we help you with doing these crops, can we get 5% or 10% of the crop? Don't go too much more than that because they need those crops to survive. You know, see if there's any way they can help you out, and you help them out by stopping the bandits before they get there. You help them out by not fighting in that town where it's going to get wiped out. They have medical problems. If you can get a hold of antibiotics to help them out, because you know that there's some available in this community over here. Let's say we got a militia operating in this area. There's another community farther away. Let's say someone there has figured out how to make their own penicillin. I mean, it's only made from bread mold, for God's sakes. You get an outbreak that happens, talk to that militia, see if they can get a hold of penicillin. They can get a hold of antibiotics to help out. That militia is the protection to make sure people can move between those communities to help each other out. Never steal from them. Never intimidate them. Talk with them, reason with them, never force them. They're going to be scared. They're going to be worried that you're not a militia, you're just a bandit group there to recon them, to steal their shit, to kidnap their women and their children. Get the idea. Well, here you go. That's just some things I could think of. I could throw together for setting up a post-event survival community. Hopefully this gets you thinking on, is the community you're in or near, could that actually be a settlement that could survive through an event? Oh, and I should mention here, with your defense of your community, everyone should be armed at all times. If you are a member of that community defense group, even if you're not on duty at that time, pulling guard duty at one of these checkpoints, or pulling observation duty up here, or you're on a listening post, observation post outside of town along the likely avenues of approach for attacking bad guys, armed. Your equipment with you, your weapon with you. And I would recommend, hey, everyone carry a knife of some type, especially a fixed-bladed knife that you can use to defend yourself or use as a tool. Even if you're not in that community defense group, you have a firearm. You know how to use it properly. And if you don't, hey, there should be lessons on firearms safety and firearms handling in that education for adults and kids. Carry the firearm with you. you know you can trust that mayor, that sheriff, that city government when they say they do not have a problem with you walking around armed. If they have a problem with you being armed, there's a problem with them. They are only concerned about themselves and their own power. They're frightened by the people. But that mayor that trusts his people to walk around armed, that's the person you want in there. He trusts you. Trust him a little bit more. Not 100%, just give him a better benefit of a doubt. Now, for everyone in the Patriot, the Militia, the Survivalist, and the Prepper communities, always remember Essayons, let us try.